Sunday, the 6th of November 2022. In this Skidmark, I'm going to talk about something that I have been thinking about for a long time. But today I got some triggers to fire me up. And that is the end of Apartheid. Now we all know most of the stories around that. There was that yes-no referendum, about which there was written a lot. And the no voters are pointing fingers at the yes voters now and so, but I don't get involved in those arguments for the simple reason it doesn't matter what we do and what we say and what we write, nothing can change it. It's done. It's history. And I was one that voted yes. And why did I vote yes? And I'm going to try and explain it. At that stage of my life, I was beginning my own business, and it's hard to start your own business. And as I was struggling and working my ass off, I thought about South Africa a lot. And for me, I was of the school of people that wanted to see our country move forward. And I was under the impression that when, let's call it, then democracy is now in place, our economy will be able to grow like hell, because I've always said the typical black South African is not a communist, he's a capitalist. Just go and look at how many vendors you see along our roads and on the sidewalks and so forth. And my thoughts were that with the restrictions removed, we will see thousands of small businessmen rising up and starting to do their own business. That would have driven our economy through the ceiling. And so I was enthusiastic about that. And then the reality hit. And I started with a BEE and affirmative action and all that shit. At that stage, we had one of the most professional civil services in the world. And all this black government had to do was to go into those departments and say to those guys there, okay, up to now, you have been providing services to about 40% of the population. Now we want this for the whole population. And why do I say 40%? I say 40% because not everybody in South Africa was excluded from things like education, health. Not everybody was. And okay, and say, right, this is how you go forward. Every senior position must immediately appoint 2 black proteges and train them to do the job and to expand the service. That would have been the correct way to do it. The state would have retained that knowledge and experience core, and they would be building out, and skills will be transferred by making and building a bigger civil service to service the whole population. But no, they went on a mission to get rid of all the white people, and they brought blacks in that had zero experience, zero idea, zero qualifications to drive that government service. Just look at that idiot of a Fikile and look at the important portfolios he's sitting in. And then you look at Cele. Then you look at that woman that's in charge of the military. Those people are definitely not the best the country has. Denel was driven into the ground. The South African Bureau of Standards are basically non-existent. Eskom is in tatters. And all of it through BEE and affirmative action, where I've always maintained that the white population was the biggest asset that the country had, because that asset could have formed the core of the growing base, and that asset was there to expand the economy in South Africa. But instead of looking after that, because it is the whites that set up shit like Eskom, like our nuclear industry, our armaments industry. But they went on a mission to get whites out of everything. BEE was used to benefit a small core of cadres that became filthy rich, and most of these companies that were forced into BEE were destroyed and just evaporated. And today you can see it. I'm going to tell you this little story. I had a very active food page on Facebook, and one night I got a private message from a black guy, and I'm going to call him Bongani. That's not his name, and I'm going to call him Bongani for the story. And on that day I published a little story about a carrot cake that I made. And this guy contacted me, and he said to me, he read my story about the carrot cake, and he looked at it, and what he would like to say is that I need some training when it comes to decorating cakes. And I said to him, listen, I'm not a cake decorator, and I've got absolutely no interest in doing decorations on cakes. I just do the stuff and smear the stuff on it so that we can eat. And we chatted for a while, and then he told me that he's working at a government department, but he has done a part-time pastry course, and he is seriously considering going on his own and start his own little business, baking cakes and doing birthday cakes and wedding cakes and occasion cakes and things like that, because he loves to do it. And he showed me some photographs of his work, and he was good. And then he said to me, he doesn't know how to really start up, because in the area where he lives, there is not premises available. And we chatted a little bit more, and then we came to an agreement, and I met him at one of the open-air restaurants here in town, and we sat down and we chatted. And I explained to him that the biggest problem for a startup, small business guy, is the fact that overheads makes it difficult. And if he's not careful with his overheads, that overheads will kill him. And then he told me that his father was killed in a car accident when he was 14 years old, and his mother brought him and his two sisters up on her own, and his father's brother has been keeping an eye over them. And his dad was a government official, and his mother, fortunately, were left with a nice house. Not a massive house, but a comfortable house. And I said to him, okay, so how do you think, where are you going to get the capital to start your business? Because to do that, you're going to need a decent oven, and you're going to need some mixer, and you're going to need a little bit of equipment and so forth. Because when you do it commercially, you can't struggle by hand, because then your product will always look handmade. And he said, no, his uncle was willing to give him a few bucks to buy the right equipment, but he is struggling to find the premises. And then I said to him, now, okay, you're a house where you are. Doesn't the house have a garage? And he said, yes, it does. And I said, okay, now for a start, rig that garage and start baking your cakes there. Then you don't have the overhead of rent, and it is at home, and you're always at your business. Do it from there, and let it go for about 3 or 4 months or 6 months and see where it goes. Right, and that is what he eventually did. And then about a year later, he contacted me again. We had a lot of contact in the meantime, and he asked me about how he should, what would I say, how must he manage his finances and things like that. And I gave him some pointers on it and helped him with that. And I made some suggestions on where he can save on his purchases and so forth and things like that. But a year later, he sent me some pictures, and there was a container in the back of his yard next to the garage. And he said his business is now expanded to such a place that he's got 2 assistants, and he bought that container, and in that container, the back half of the container, he's got 2 fridges in there, and he's got now 3 ovens inside the container. And he uses the garage still for the wet work. And I was so impressed with him. And he told me that he had bought himself a small panel van to do deliveries and so forth, and it was great. And I thought to myself, this is the thing that this ANC cadres with their BEE and affirmative action has destroyed in our country. The sharing of experience, this transfer of skills, that was murdered basically. And we are paying today, the country is paying. Look at our country. Basically nothing is operational anymore, nothing works. Everything is in tatters. And you go into the government offices, I mean it's a nightmare, because the people that are supposed to serve you, many of them are clueless. There are some of them that are really frustrated because they want to do the work, but they don't know how. So they sit there and get the day and just let the time and hours pass by. So we will never fully capitalize the real damage that BEE and affirmative action has done. We will never be able. But if you look around, you can see it. If you see stupid things like the one thing that I had in one of my Skidmarks about the potholes, the farmers repair potholes over a 30-kilometer piece of road in 7 days, and they fixed the potholes, and then the government over the same distance on another road, roughly the same number of potholes. The farmers fixed all those potholes in 7 days for 75,000 rand, and the government did their potholes over more than a year at 3.5 million rand. That, our country cannot afford that, because that millions that was pissed out into that potholes could have paid for teachers, could have paid salaries for teachers that could be teaching kids. It could have paid for 2 or 3 or 4 decent classrooms, because the black kids don't have those facilities and opportunities. And to me it is a sad thing that we ended where we ended. And people can call me lots of things, but they must never call me a racist, because I'm not a racist. Yes, of course I love my race, and I am aware that there are racial differences in our society, but that doesn't make me a racist. And in any case, the reason why I'm doing this Skidmark is today I saw this on Twitter, and I read it and I thought to myself, at last the lights is coming on. And it was a News 24 thing, and it was our Mr. Godongwana, the financial guy. Institutions such as Eskom, Transnet and Denel no longer have to disqualify suppliers just because they do not meet BEE requirements. Godongwana promulgated new regulations that do away with a controversial qualification that has been in place since 2017. I read it and I thought to myself, yeah, what the hell? at last the lights is coming on. They're seeing what this has done. I mean, I have personal experience with a young white guy that does work that the government buys. But the government won't buy from him directly because he's a one-man show, a white single owner of his little business. But they like his work. So the tenderpreneurs, they buy from him and supply the government. He sells a product for 25 Rand to that tenderpreneur. That tenderpreneur charged the government 320 Rand for that same thing. What fucking madness is that? In any case, let me not dwell on that. And this article on Twitter, you cannot believe the shitstorm what was there from these black racists. They went bananas about this. And I made a response to one guy and I said, listen, when you need 103 laws to protect 96% of the population against 4%, all you're actually confirming is that that 96 is incapable of competing. But in any case. So there was a lot of racist stories about this. There's apparently one section in that regulation that somebody mentioned it and said that we must just be careful now that this doesn't mean that foreign companies can jump in and get everything. But in any case, let's see where that goes. And then I saw this one. Just in, the Northwest Department of Community Safety said it has spent 780,000 Rand on acquiring 20 donkey carts, which it has given to villagers in the Dibono and Marwana districts outside Maikeng. The two-seater is 32,500 each, and the four-seater is 45,500. And there's a picture, you can look at that. And that's our donkey carts. And it reminded me about that COVID fiasco down in the Cape of that scooters with a sidecar, that scooter ambulances that were bought also at a ridiculous price. And I thought to myself, okay, I can understand that for some communities this is already a hell of an advantage. But it's 2022. This is startup stuff from the 1930s, man, in any case. And then I stumbled onto this. And it was posted by a tweeter that calls herself Mozilla. Unbeknown to majority of South Africans, 1994 democracy came from the will of the whites. Keep in mind, if the whites did not want the end of apartheid, it would not have happened. In 1994, the SA Army was an army with highly skilled, trained, alerted and fit soldiers, not the overweight KFC eaters in our army of today. These soldiers held peace in South Africa, and against our borders, there was no such thing as illegal immigrants going to and fro on our borders. These soldiers could easily have been instructed to go into war mode. Few of them would have died, and thousands of black people would have been killed. Some would have been innocent children. Those who choose to believe Julius Malema's white propaganda do the same as the Christians do. They accept that wolf in sheep's clothing at the pulpit is preaching the truth, and they are too lazy to pick up their Bibles and check if what they hear is the truth. So how did democracy happen in South Africa? On 17 March 1992, a referendum limited to white South African voters was held, who were asked whether or not they supported the end of apartheid. The result of the election was a large victory for the yes side, which ultimately resulted in apartheid being lifted. The result proved that the white population in South Africa are not the evil people Malema is persecuting and wants you to believe. White South Africans are being persecuted for doing what was right. I wonder how many regret voting a yes in 1994 to end apartheid. How many black people are prepared to end the reverse apartheid today if we should hold a referendum? And I was stunned when I read this. And let me tell you, there were obviously a large number of tweeters that attacked her, but there were also a large number of black tweeters that supported her view. And then there were a few whites. There was one white woman that made a fucking stupid remark like the whites didn't have an option because the country was going bankrupt. That is the biggest bullshit that there was ever. One thing that you can be sure of, if there was still white skills and brains in our government, there wouldn't have been the situation where highly sensitive and advanced technology from Krijgkor were sold to the Arabs for basically a sack of shit. It wouldn't have happened. None of our minerals would have been pillaged by foreign powers. South African factories and steel industry would still have been fully running with millions of people in jobs. Our infrastructure wouldn't have been stripped down to fuck all like it's happening with our railroads. Those things would have been maintained and built out. That is what South Africa would have had if white people were still participating in the management of this country. And who knows, we were far advanced on the pebble bed nuclear reactors, South African brains, and we would have had those plants up by now, no problem with electricity. This is what the blacks, these racist blacks, has robbed themselves of. Go and look at the history of what the white government invested in black education and compare it to what you blacks must be happy with today. I did a skidmark on the education thing. It is absolutely a disaster. And young children will go through a school, get to a matric that is useless, and they will never be employable. And then they must not forget, in the background, the WEF is hovering, and that WEF has got a lot of agents in South Africa, in government. And those people, one of their mantras is the world don't need useless eaters. So these unemployed blacks must remember they are useless eaters in the eyes of the WEF. And the WEF has said the useless eaters must be culled. So the black people must sit down and think, listen to what this lady has said and think about it. You are stealing your own future because of racism. You must stop with that. And if you look around you, look at the young white people. They cannot get jobs like blacks can get with the government. And so young white people have to do their own thing. Look at their small businesses. Go and walk through the light industrial area of the town or city where you are. Look who is running businesses there. Look and ask yourself, is that beneficial to black people? Go and look at the old homelands. All of them had well-developed industrial zones. because the apartheid government had that system of decentralization, of getting industries to develop where the people live. That was abandoned. Those industrial zones are empty. And the people there, because they want to make a living, has all flocked to the cities. And look around the cities, one squatter camp on the other. So people abandoned their homes in their homelands and they moved to the city, and now they're living in a sinkaya there under horrible conditions. Whereas if this government continued what the apartheid government did and kept developing the deindustrialized zones, those people living in shacks around Joburg would be in their homelands next to industrial zones where they could have been employed and had their own little businesses and small businesses and build their communities out. And that's the story. But I'm not going to carry on with this. This was really, for me, an incredible thread to read. And I'm going to put the screen of this girl's Twitter account up so that you can see. And if you want to go and visit her timeline and check what she does and so, because this is the type of brain, this is the type of thinker that our country desperately needs. And on that note, please hit me with a like and subscribe and share the thing. I see I've got a troll that is traveling through all my videos and giving me thumbs downs and so forth. I hope the guy gets an orgasm every time that he does that. But I'm a guy that believes in karma. And I think karma is now visiting South Africa's government. And they're not going to like it. Have a great evening.